Welcome to the Inside EcoDevo podcast. I'm your host, Eric Thurman, and on this episode, we're talking about the Missouri Broadband Map Challenge through the Office of Broadband Development here in the Department of Economic Development. And sitting down with us are two guests. First, we have BJ Tanksley. He's the director of the Office of Broadband Development. Welcome, BJ.
Yeah, Eric, good to be with you again. It's an exciting time. As always, the office is busy, but we've got some exciting things coming up.
And I believe you are our most returning guest. I think this is the third or fourth time we've sat down with you now.
I'm a glutton for it. I'll come anytime you ask.
I think it speaks to how much is going on in broadband through Missouri and how much information there is to share.
Well, I appreciate it.
And our other guest is Amelia Aubuchon. She's the GIS Coordinator with the Office of Broadband Development. Welcome, Amelia.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah. Okay, so let's dive into it. We're here talking about the Missouri Broadband Map Challenge. I know in previous episodes, I think around episode 27, we talked about a map that people could go on and, put in information on if their service was correct or not. Mm-hmm. Is the map we're talking about today, is that similar, different, same? What's going on?
Yeah, so we talk about maps a lot in broadband, and it gets confusing quick, but we'll try to simplify it. In January of 23, we were talking about the FCC challenge, and that was to help determine the amount of funding Missouri was going to receive for the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. And we received that in July of this past year. That was the $1.7 billion that people talk about quite a bit, but that was dependent on people proving to the FCC locations across the state of Missouri that didn't have access to high-speed internet. So that determined our funding. The process that we're talking about now, that we're about to opening on March 25th, may be open by the time people are listening to this, will actually determine the locations that we can fund. And so, yes, the information that was made right in the FCC process was carried over to this, but if there are remaining discrepancies between reality and what is depicted on the map, then we'll be able to fix it now before we actually deploy these once-in-a-lifetime funds to try to bring service to every location.
This map, there's not really anything that the general citizen is doing. They're not going on and interacting with it like they did with the FCC one.
Yes, they can take part in this process the same way they could with the FCC map. Missouri, Amelia, and our Sanborn mapping companies working together have developed a process where nonprofit organizations, local governments, broadband providers, and citizens can weigh in on this map. So we want all interested parties that are out there to be a part of this process because we want the map to be as good as possible. Amelia, do you want to talk about a little bit about the processes by which citizens and providers, nonprofits can take part in it?
Yeah, and I would just asterisk, if you do lack broadband, this is your time to go in, check the map, make sure that it reflects correctly to show that you do show as unserved or underserved. And that is because through this BEAD program, we can only come to locations, we can only fund locations that are categorized in that way. So really want to make sure this message reaches those folks and you do go and check the map if you are in that category, you don't have broadband, you need it. So like BJ mentioned, members of the public will be able to participate in this process. The challenge process will open March 25th, like BJ mentioned.
Yeah, we've probably hidden the lead a little bit. The map is available at broadbandmap.mo.gov. Citizens can go there. It is user-friendly off of a cell phone. Again, that's broadbandmap.mo.gov. You don't have to put www in front of it. Actually, you probably shouldn't. But broadbandmap.mo.gov. It's also available on the DED website. If you go to the mapping or map challenge process headings, you'll be able to find that map. But broadbandmap.mo.gov will take you directly to the map that we're referencing.
You can go to that map, that broadbandmap.mo.gov, check your location. If you're lacking broadband, you see that you're categorized as served, you will want to submit evidence that could substantiate a challenge. So that will then flow through to an eligible challenger. So this starts getting complex quickly. So eligible challengers who can file to the Office of Broadband are only eligible entities are nonprofits, internet service providers, and then also local governments. So only those three types of organizations can file a challenge. However, if you're a member of the public, you can submit evidence that will go to an eligible challenger through our map. And we've partnered with the University of Missouri to file those challenges on behalf of the public. So if you're a member of the public, your evidence will go to University of Missouri. They will then pass that through to our office. So probably more information than you maybe wanted if you're a member of the public, but did want to just explain that to people so they understand how this process is going to work.
Yeah, that's a great point. And the program itself, the BEAD program, said, hey, we should take input from service providers and local governments and nonprofits. Well, as an office, we made the decision that we wanted to allow the public one more chance to weigh in. Who knows better where broadband is available than those people that live with it every day? And so we partnered with the University of Missouri to allow those citizens, Missouri citizens, everyday people, my parents, yours, your house, any business location you may be intimate with, can then weigh in on those locations as well. That information is submitted as evidence. It goes to the University of Missouri, and they submit it to us because they're an eligible challenger, but we wanted to make sure there was a process for everyday citizens to weigh in. It's also very important to talk about nonprofits, local governments. If you're interested in an area and you know this area isn't accurately depicted on the map, please take part in this process as well. We need meaningful input from people that know these areas. Also, local governments, they know well what areas of town or the city or village they may represent that aren't well represented with broadband coverage. We need to make sure the maps are accurate in order to be able to fund them. As Amelia said, the BEAD program says we'll be able to fund service to all unserved and underserved locations as long as they're not funded by another program. But we have to know exactly where those locations are. We have a considerable amount of money. $1.7 billion is a lot of funding. We also know we have a lot of work to do, but we can't come to your location if you don't make sure you're accurately represented on the map.
When you say submitting evidence, what constitutes evidence that you're underserved or lacking service? Is it, doing an internet speed test and taking a screenshot and showing the speed? Is there other kinds of things that constitutes evidence?
That's exactly right. Amelia will get into a little bit of the details, but we're super excited. This is the first time ever that I recall we'll actually be able to accept speed test as a challenge. In the past, there was always questions about, well, how do you do speed test and know that they're relatively accurate? But this time we will be able to accept speed test. Now, there's a little bit of a hurdle. You have to do 3 different speed tests on 3 different days if you're a citizen receiving service. But our portal that Amelia's worked with will actually directly accept that evidence and then compile it and then send it on like we said. So we tried to make it as user-friendly as possible, even though there is a little bit of a hurdle there. But Amelia, you can talk to the other types of evidence also that we would accept or that we need to see when it comes to receiving these challenges.
This gets into the topic of the types of challenges. So members of the public, like BJ mentioned, you'll be able to file speed tests, and that you'll be able to do that directly through the map. So broadbandmap.mo.gov, and the map will kind of guide you through how to take these speed tests so that they meet the requirements that we have to meet per the BEAD process. So you can go in, you can take a speed test. We're going to be releasing lots of documentation, so certainly hope that folks reference this if they really want to get into the details. We'll have it on our broadband website. But really, the speed tests, the folks that will want to go in and take these are people who might be unserved or underserved with their current speed. So you might be subscribed to something above 100/20 as your internet speed, but you might be getting below 100/20. That would put you into the unserved category, and that would make you eligible for us to come to you with BEAD funding. So same with unserved. So you're considered unserved if you have less than 25/3 as your internet speed. If you're subscribing to something above 25/3, you're getting less than that. You can take a speed test. Again, that'll bump you down into one of those categories that would make you eligible for BEAD, and we could bring funds to your location.
There's also other types of challenges. There's speed test challenges, but there's also whether or not that service is actually available at your location. And you can prove that by going to the provider's website and entering your address to try to receive service. Take a screenshot where it says that service isn't available at your location. Or you could call the provider and have record of a phone call that says, hey, I tried to get signed up for service and it wasn't going to be available at my location inside of 10 days and without an extra charge to deploy that service. And so you can submit lots of different kinds of evidence. The provider world and the nonprofit world and the local government world, there's also challenges they can do, which is like availability. They know where the infrastructure is and isn't. They can also do those, prove where service can be delivered and where it cannot. Providers out there may know where service is that isn't showing up on the map, and they can do that by showing us diagrams of their systems, showing us where they have subscribers. And so this challenge process, really we want to accept as much information as we can. What ultimately happens is then our team will look through the evidence, judge it, allow the provider world to weigh back, because it is a two-way conversation, right? We don't just change from served to unserved or the opposite until we really take in both sides of the conversation, because we know it is important, and then making the ultimate decision of where we spend these public funds to bring service.
Do you guys have any kind of insight or ballpark range of how many Missourians are still underserved or unserved?
Our estimates are somewhere in the neighborhood of about 400,000 Missourians without access today. But luckily, Missouri has also been one of the larger recipients of public funding through other programs, whether that be our ARPA program, which we've talked about here before, whether that is the federal programs like USDA's Reconnect or FCC's Rural Digital Opportunity Fund or their Connect America funds. So Missouri is actually one of the largest recipients of funding. So of the 400,000-ish locations without service today, we estimate there's about 200 to 210,000 that also aren't funded by another program. So we anticipate, if we looked at it as of right now, about 200, 210,000 locations across the state of Missouri that don't have access. And I think if we look at the total number of locations, there's a couple million, maybe between 2 and 3 million locations across the state. But when you look at that today, there's a lot of places that don't have service, but about half of them are funded through a program currently. And so we're trying to close the gap on those remaining ones.
And I know a lot of projects have kind of been underway and completed and all that. Are you seeing those numbers, the numbers of need, are you seeing that come down as these processes are going through?
Yeah, we really are. We see this change. So the FCC accepts information on service availability on an every 6 months basis, and we see those numbers change, I would say relatively dramatically every time there's a new reporting. We see it on the programs that we're facilitating where progress is being made on these projects. People are being connected, right? And we also see it pop up in other federal awarded areas. I can think of several areas across the state where this area was funded and now service is showing as being available. And so we're very excited to see that. What we don't see changing a ton is that about 200,000 locations that I was referring to, those are the tough to reach places. Those are the ones that haven't been funded, and there's not a ton of progress on changing that number because largely we're talking about really tough to reach areas. They're rural, there's rough terrain. It's going to take some type of public support for those projects to get them across the finish line.
Yeah. So getting back to the MAP challenge process, through this process, what is OBD's kind of hand in all of it and, the continued mapping efforts? Because there's a lot of talk about citizens and businesses, internet service providers, putting information on the map and communicating and all that. OBD, what are you guys doing through this process?
Yeah, so this kind of gets into after the challenge process, there will be a rebuttal phase. And during this rebuttal phase, our office will be going in, we'll be reviewing all of the evidence that was submitted to make determinations rebuttal phase is where the ISPs will have an opportunity to rebut. But then in the final determination phase, that's where our office is going to be reviewing all of the evidence and then making determinations on how to decide on the challenge, if the challenge should be sustained because the evidence does prove that service is or is not available, or reject the challenge. So that's when we'll be stepping in this adjudicator role, making those determinations. And then if there are difficult situations where, we've got evidence on both sides, we can't make a decision with a reasonable degree of confidence, we'll pull in someone to do some boots on the ground verification to make sure that we're making these calls to the best of our ability. So we'll be adjudicators ultimately, all of this data will get reflected on the map that we're able to use to fund and bring service to Missourians.
It's a new role for our office, right? We've always been the promoter. We've been the ones helping to get grants out, but in this case, we're promoting people taking advantage of the challenge process and the challenge opportunity, but we also will become kind of the judge and jury, the adjudicator in making the final determination. And so Amelia did a great job contracting with the mapping company, but with that contract came some support for outside help to actually cover the state. If we don't know if that service is available, they'll be able to help go prove that, because it does, like I said, it's a different role for our team of then deciding, yes, this place is fundable, or no, it's not. And we don't take that lightly, because every location needs to have quality service. And so each one of those will be an important decision, but it will be a little bit of a new role. So people will hear us promoting the process, but we can't submit evidence. And all of that has to go through the challenge portal and through an actual challenger, because we have to make sure that we're careful to protect ourselves, that it never looks like we're encouraging challenges or being a part of the challenge process, because we truly are the judge and jury on making final decisions in this case.
Yeah, I guess in essence, and correct me if I'm wrong here, it sounds like there's plenty of money to fund projects that are needed, but you want to make sure the money is spent wisely and in the most need possible.
That's exactly right. We could summarize this whole podcast in that right there. You did a fantastic job, because that's really what we're doing here. We have a good amount of funds. We think we have enough funds to get the job done, but we have to make sure we do it in the right places.
How does getting this map right help Missourians with getting broadband or increased service? Yeah, they put their data on there, and I guess it's going to be used to decide, okay, this place is going to get it, this place is in more need than this one. But ultimately, I guess from an outside perspective looking in, how does just getting the map right get service to somebody's door?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we do here is we make locations fundable or not. We make the determination if they're fundable through the BEAD program or not. What we do eventually, once we've finished this whole process, is we submit this to NTIA, the funding partner for the program, and then they approve it back to us. And that is essentially our playing field for our work with the BEAD program. If your location appears fundable, it's our job to find a provider willing to help bring service, quality service to your business or your home, whatever that location may be. And so this really does set the playing field for that. What happens post-challenge process, which the citizens and challengers will know there's a 30-day challenge window. Well, there's 60 to 90 days work between that. But in July, we will open for applications for the BEAD program, and that's where service providers will start submitting applications to us for the areas that they think that they can bring service to in a reasonable way, and then we will start awarding those next fall. And so if your location is marked accurately, you will be a part of that process. And so we want to make sure that we're being mindful of where we do that and where we make these investments, because we're making large investments and so are the providers. They have to come with 25% match, and they have to, help bring service. And it's not light for either side of this equation. But we want to make sure that, for lack of a better term, that nobody's left behind because they weren't accurately mapped.
It sounds like the map is kind of the crux of making a lot of decisions. How do you know if the map's correct?
Yeah.
Could somebody put in false data, whether willingly or not? Somebody gets on there thinking they're doing it right. And how is it all being vetted?
A couple things come to mind. So when you're going in the challenge or into the portal to file a challenge, we've tried to build in as much guidance as possible. So it'll let you know if you're whatever type of challenge you're submitting, what kind of evidence we're expecting. We're putting together user guides, training. And then the other thing that comes to mind is we're going to have standards of review for our office. So these are, again, another requirement of this BEAD program. We have to have standards of review that we train our internal reviewers on, so that whenever they are looking at evidence that people submit, we're vetting them consistently according to those processes. So between those two things, we're hoping to catch if there are instances where folks don't input the evidence we're needing, we're able to catch those.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is there's a check and balance. So people submit challenges, and then we share that with the challenged provider. So this all starts because at some point on a map, it said, XYZ provider was providing service at this location. And then the person who lived there or knew that location says it's not available. Well, then we will share the evidence shared with us back with XYZ provider, and they will have the opportunity to rebut that. And so it's a two-way conversation. We're just kind of in the middle of it. And so we're not making any of these, monetary impacting decisions without hearing from both sides of the conversation. It doesn't go back and forth more than that, but we see the evidence from both, and then the provider's able to submit evidence of why they can provide that service. And so there's an opportunity for rebuttal before we would make any final decisions. Mapping is such a big conversation that's been around broadband since I've been around it. So for 10 years, we've been talking about mapping, and what's important for everybody to realize is we're going from a situation where less than 10 years ago, people were mapping broadband on a census block level. If one location was considered served, that whole census block was considered served. And this is a paradigm shift that now we're talking about what we always wanted, was talking about actual at the physical location access. And so now we're just kind of sanding the edges off of changing from one mapping view to a new mapping view. And it's going to be better for all of us in the end, both the providers and the citizens, but it takes a little while to make sure we get this as right as possible.
Any negative repercussions if not enough people interact with the map? It sounds like there's enough need that I'm sure people are on there doing what they need to do, but what happens if not enough people give the data that's needed?
We want people to take part in this. We believe the map is pretty close, right? There are places that are right and there are places that are wrong, but we need citizens to weigh in. If they don't, the problem would be we wouldn't be able to bring service to their location, or we would be spending funds on a location that might already have service, and that could ultimately cost someone else from getting service, right? For every location that looks like we need to fund that maybe we didn't need to, is a location that needs service. And so we need to make sure that we have as much of that right as possible. I mean, we're talking about, I think it's over 2 million locations across the entire state. To think that we're going to have every single one perfectly right is probably a high bar to set. But we need to have it as close as possible, because then what happens is when providers come and apply for an area, we're asking them to get service to that entire area, but we can only fund the locations that look like they need service. So we need to have that as right as possible. And I do think there's enough motivation from the provider world, from the local government world. Like if you're a city leader and you hear a lot about, hey, my neighborhood or my part of town doesn't have quality service, weigh in on our maps. Let's get it right, because we want to make sure that we do this right. But we hope the motivation is there, because it really is going to direct where funding goes.
Is there a risk of communities or internet service providers not being aware? The internet service provider not being aware seems a little weird, but I'll ask the question anyway. But is there a risk of certain communities who are in real need of broadband expansion and better service not being aware of getting that information out? Can communities have that potential of being left behind? And is there a backup plan if that does happen?
There's always that risk. We're doing everything we can, working with the nonprofit world, working with the advocacy world, the Association of Counties, Missouri Municipal League, those that have inroads, working with the councils of government. And so those groups that have big distribution list and know these communities well, we're trying to work with them as well to make sure that we're getting every way we can. And we're going to be on the radio, and we're going to be on social media, and we're going to be doing podcasts just like this one and others to try to promote this and why it's so important. But there's always that risk that someone falls through the cracks. It is an ongoing conversation with the federal funders that if we found a community or an area that needed service that never looked like it did, would we be able to change that midstream? The initial answer was no, that this is it, get it right, and then we move on to funding phase. More recently, there was a more pragmatic answer that I received, which was like, if you had a reasonable argument, there's a chance that we would be able to amend these fundable locations if you still thought you could. I hope we lean that way, but at the same time, what I've learned over my couple of years here is we're working with the federal government. We have to play within their rules, and so we need to make this as right as possible.
From both of your guys' respective positions, when you're talking to citizens and ISPs and all of this stuff, what are you guys hearing? What's the feedback you guys are getting? And Amelia, I guess I'll pitch to you first.
When people look at the map, usually their first thing that they do is plug in their address from what I've seen. And there are instances where people look at it, looks great. But again, there are instances, this is again why we're one of the reasons behind the challenge process, where they see it and it is not accurate for their location. Of course, the first question is, what do I do to fix this? This process is intended to help us with that. And it's going to be a collaborative effort from a lot of different people. So members of the community, ISPs, because there is going to be this rebuttal phase where, we want to get it right for these locations, make sure we're going to the right places. So ISPs making sure when they get these challenges, them taking a look at them, providing us evidence if they don't think that it is valid. And then also, I haven't talked about this a whole lot, but there will also be challenges for community anchor institutions where community anchors who are not getting 1 gig service, download, upload, can go in and make sure that they're reflected on the map correctly, because that is one of the things we're trying to do, is make sure that all the community anchor institutions in the state have the broadband that they need for their mission.
And community anchor institutions are schools, libraries, hospitals, places like that. And Amelia's right. They are their own type of challenge. But if you know or work with one and you know that they don't have fantastic service, we're talking gig service, that's as good as it gets basically, you can submit a challenge to those as well, because we want to make sure that they are well served. And they're called community anchors because they are, right? That's where people go when they don't have other places to go. That's where business happens for the community, or healthcare situations, and we know how vital that can be. And so we want to make sure they have service as well. Amelia's not patting herself on the back, but what I hear from people that go to the map is that the map is awesome. It really is. I hope people, even if they're not worried about broadband, will go and check it out. It has a lot of functionality. Obviously, you can search your own location and see if you're expected to have service, but it also shows a lot of good statistics at the county level, at a congressional district level, at a local school district. Well, maybe not school district, but it does show legislative districts, and lots of different breakdowns of who has service and who doesn't, as currently reported. It also does a really good job of showing already funded areas. And so we hear a lot from citizens. Like I said, about half of the areas that don't have service today are funded by another program. And so this does a good job of mapping those locations as well. And so this map really does, and Amelia and the team have done a great job of mapping this and making it pretty clear what's needed and what's not. And then this mapping process will just help us make it better. But she's not patting herself on the back as much as she should. And it's a great product. It's easy to use. And what I'm super excited about as we move into this challenge phase is this is going to become more than just a map. It's now a tool for citizens to be able to weigh in on the map, for providers to be able to show where they provide service, and they will also use this. They know it, it's not, but this is where they will submit the areas that they would like to apply for. We call it our RFI process, but it is more than just a map. At this point, it's a tool for all citizens of the state to check out and get a lay of the land. It's always fun to explore it with people and go, did you know that, a mile outside of town, no one has quality service? And people don't realize that.
And then just outside of the map in general, what's the kind of buzz, the kind of atmosphere that you guys are hearing? Adam, who's been on the show before, I hear him on the phone with a lot of people all the time. So I know you guys are getting calls and whatnot from people. What in general are you hearing?
Across the United States, broadband offices are all kind of in varying degrees of where we are. There's a few that have already wrapped up their challenge process. Most of those received tens of thousands of challenges. So that's the kind of volume we're expecting too. And then there's those that are a little bit behind us that will be having their challenge process probably sometime this summer. There's a lot of anticipation, I think is the right word for it, for how do we meaningfully award all of this. The provider world seems excited, but nervous. We're talking about a big program and several unknowns. And to those providers out there that may be listening, we're going to be getting out a lot of information. While this challenge process is going on, we're going to be spending a lot of time talking to them about what does the actual application look like, what do the regulations look like, because we really need their participation. I say this all the time. We don't deliver broadband. We help fund getting broadband to people. And we need active participation from the provider world. And so we're going to spend a lot of time while we're working out those locations, while the adjudication and the back and forth is going on of the challenge process. We'll be looking towards the next step, which starts in July. So we'll be spending time promoting that application process and making sure that providers feel comfortable that we've put together a program that they can be successful in and that we can get people service.
Amelia, did you have anything else to add on the feedback kind of outside, just in general, that you guys are getting?
State broadband offices across the nation, I think, are very busy right now with the BEAD grant program that's in every state. So, Missouri, we got the third largest allocation in the country. So we have a very big need for broadband services in our state. And people that I get the chance to talk to some members of the public that we've spoken with. There are people who really need this service out there. So very, very excited to be a part of the work that this team does to try and connect all Missourians. So that's our goal with this program. So we're going to be doing a ton of work in the next few years to try to reach everyone.
And this question is probably more directly at you, Amelia. As the GIS coordinator, I'm sure you had a heavy hand in helping develop the map. Can you talk about that process a little bit and what goes into that?
This subject can get complex quickly, so if I'm speaking in jargon, please let me know and I'll back up and start explaining some of these terms. BJ talked about this a little bit earlier in the show, but years back, the way that broadband was mapped was at, I want to say, a census block or census block group level. So if one location was served in that group, the whole area was marked as served. Now that we have addresses, we're able to now go in and at the address level be able to tell if that address, that broadband serviceable location is the terminology we use for it, if it does indeed have service, if it's an address that's unserved or underserved. And so when we talk about that, there is underneath of that the data component of this. So one of the big changes has been that since we're mapping at an address level, we need address level data. The federal government, the FCC, is using what we call in the broadband world the CostQuest fabric. And that is just a data set of addresses that need broadband. So homes, businesses. And so we are using that per the BEAD guidance. We have to use that as our underlying location fabric. And then on top of that is the broadband availability data. And so that data is reported from the service providers. FCC collects this data every 6 months. And so for the BEAD program, we're using that broadband data collection, that availability data in the map. So there's a lot of data coordination on the back end. And then also because of the requirements of the BEAD process, we needed to stand up essentially it's a web application that has capabilities to meet the BEAD requirements. So luckily, some really great web developers out there who are helping us with this from Sanborn, making sure that, on the front end, you see this map, but our office will have a dashboard. We're able to track challenges as they come in, internet service providers who are going to be looking at these challenges, providing rebuttals potentially. They'll have their own dashboard, local governments, all these eligible challengers will have dashboards they can go into. So there's also this web development component with the BEAD program. So from the GIS standpoint, there's a lot that goes into this, but I won't get too much more into the details unless you guys want.
Sounds like a lot of work went into it.
It sure is. And really, you're talking about trying to put down where the locations are and then trying to match the data that hundreds of providers are then submitting. What Amelia and some of the team have been doing lately is trying to contact all the providers to make sure that they're registered to be a part of this so that if I challenge one, that then I know who to contact, right? So all of these things behind the scenes to make sure this goes as smoothly as possible. And Amelia alluded to it there with the dashboard conversation. We will be sharing information with the public throughout this process. if I'm not mistaken, on the map, you'll be able to see if a location was challenged. So like if I challenged my home, then it would show up a different color and it would indicate that my home is in the challenge process, right? Until there's a choice made of whether it's served or unserved. So people don't have to continually check with us. They'll be able to see that there. And so then also you'll be able to go to the website and see where there has been proposed service challenges. And so people will be able to see, oh, I am shown as unserved, but XYZ provider said they're bringing me service within 6 months. And so there'll be a lot of that kind of public information that we'll be sharing, but none of that happens without pre-planning and having a system with which to do it. And Amelia and the mapping partner, Sanborn Mapping Company, have done a fantastic job of getting us ready for, like we said, March 25th is the kickoff. The public receiving of public information with all of those eligible challengers will go for 30 days. So we're talking March 25th. Amelia, what's the official end day?
April 23rd.
Okay. So
about a month.
About a month is what we're looking at, and we really hope that people take part in it in a big way.
Is there going to be, or is there an established kind of threshold limit of when you call a place served? Like if service is coming to a large area, is it 75% of that area or those people, 90%? What's kind of the amount before you go, okay, we're good?
Yeah, so at this point, it's every single one.
Okay.
So in the past, there's been programs that funded by percentages, 70, 80, 90. But with this, it's literally every location. And we realize that every location is not created equal for ourselves or for the providers out there. I've seen the example of one home in a rural county that cost $200,000 just to serve that one, because it was a mile down a road and then it was a mile down a driveway, right? It was a long way to get service to these people. And so we realized that. But the goal of this program and the charge from the federal government to us for the funding we received is to get service to every location. And so that we tried to set up a program to do so. The good news is we have the funding to be able to support that, but it is a heavy lift.
Beginning March 25th, ending April 23rd. How long after that process before action is seen?
Yeah, so they will see action on the map kind of on a rolling basis. You submit a challenge, the dot changes color, you'll see a determination. You may receive emails back and forth through the portal that says, hey, your challenge has been received, it's been passed on, it's being rebutted, things like that. But seeing movement will happen kind of on a rolling basis as we make determinations. It may be that you challenged me as a service provider, and I said, oh, yeah, I inaccurately reported that location's not served, and it changes immediately. But in early June is when we anticipate submitting this to NTIA. And at that point, that's when we have kind of set the playing field for ourselves. They approved the process that we're undergoing, which included some really somewhat technical things like assuming that cellular broadband is considered underserved, that cable-based service, copper-based service is considered unserved. Those were pre-challenge modifications that we made to the map. And so those things all went into play. NTIA approved them, and then we'll submit this saying, you approved the process. This is the end result. We assume they'll approve it back to us. But once they do, then, like I said, in July, we'll start taking applications. That puts us on a timeline to early fall of this year, announce first round of awards. And then you will probably see physical movement on these projects in mid-2025. That actually like breaking ground and starting to move with the first round projects is what I would anticipate. Because unfortunately, even though that sounds like it's a long way away, that we have to go through environmentals, we have to go through financials, we have to go through historic reviews, and you understand the reasoning for all that. We all want it today, but we hope to be able to let these projects move forward as quickly as possible. But just in reality, we're probably talking a mid-2025 beginning of construction, and the BEAD program funding is supposed to be wrapped up by 2028. So we talked about ARPA before. That goes through 2026. This BEAD program can go through 2028. And frankly, if it had to go longer, as long as projects were moving forward, we would probably be able to. But our hope is within 4 years from now, we're seeing a significant difference. And those last projects are just finishing up to make connections with everyone.
This might be kind of a silly question, but it kind of popped up in my head in this day and age. It's kind of something that does run rampant a little bit. Is there any kind of, for lack of a better term, protection for somebody who goes, okay, I'm going to challenge my ISP. They said they gave me a certain amount of speed and it's not there. I'm going to challenge them. Any kind of possibility that an ISP goes, how dare you challenge me? We gave you that speed. It is there. That kind of protection there, I should say.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's rare, you know, but...
yeah, I don't know that we see a lot of that. I think ISPs understand that challenges are going to happen. It's a part of the process. They all went through a similar process with the FCC challenges. So I think they anticipate it. From what I hear from the provider world is they're anticipating being challenged. I think most of them say in the areas that they're providing great service, they don't have any problem being challenged because they know they can defend the service that they have available. And so the other thing that we hear, and Amelia may be able to speak to this, but ISPs have been asked to change how they report their service availability. And so they've been going through a bit of a curing process internally too. They've only been doing this for 2 years to the FCC, which is only like 3 reportings to the FCC, where they used to do it by census block and now they're doing it by location. And so they're doing some curing of their own too. I don't think there'll be repercussions, so much or retaliation, but I do think they're anticipating being challenged. And especially I think in the ones I've heard from, those places where they know they give great service to, they're welcome to defending it. In those areas, they may know that there's some curing to be done in what they've been submitting.
Exactly to BJ's point, this BDC, broadband data collection effort from the FCC has only been happening for, I think, since 2022, I want to say. And so, teeny things like, the polygons they submitted, they might not have shown up correctly and an edge might not have included a location. So there are a variety of reasons that this data might have inaccuracies in it. And so this is an effort to help everyone improve the maps, not just us. Ultimately, we're planning to, if we get challenges availability challenges that could affect the FCC map, to forward those on as well. Because we do want, if people are going in and they're helping us improve this data, we want to, help everyone as much as we possibly can. So help improve the FCC maps. Hopefully the providers will see this as an opportunity as well to improve their BDC data submissions.
Like I said, probably a silly question, but I figured it bared asking there. So kind of getting back to the timeline of stuff. Mm-hmm. Challenge process going to be happening after that. A lot of kind of reviewing and whatnot. Projects starting around 2025, probably going to 2028. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that's going to happen in between there. Yeah. But what's next after all of this? And I know there's a lot still to come, and I'm sure we'll sit down again and talk about it. But there's always that next thing that needs to be tackled. Do we have eyes on that yet?
Yeah, it's almost hard to think about that far down the line. What we anticipate thinking of this is a round of applications in 2024, a round of applications in early 2025, and that kind of staggers the beginning of projects, right? What we hope to see with great participation is being able to award all locations a quality connection. If there are areas that we're not able to through the traditional 1 or 2 rounds of grant making, we're actually expected to go to those areas and bring providers and communities together and try to say, what does it take to bring service to this area? Another thing that's being considered is other technologies. We can fund wireless technology, we can fund fiber technology, but there are other technologies that have been making good advancements. And I know there's a national conversation going on about those locations that are the most hard to get to. I talked about that one. It was $200,000 to reach that one location. Would another technology be better, a low-orbit satellite type of technology, which I've heard people are having great success with? When you're not expected to cover everyone and you're covering those tough-to-reach areas, it's a great service, right? And so that's another big thing that's in this conversation kind of between now and 2028. I think what we hope for is a whole bunch of really great projects that are going on. Our team will be working diligently to make sure the funding is staying on time and the projects are moving forward. We will see our ARPA-funded projects wrapping up by the end of 2026. So kind of halfway between now and 2028, you'll see those 54,000 locations connected. That's huge, right? That's a quarter of what we're talking about connecting here, and that's really good news. But what do we see kind of after 2028? Hopefully very few locations across the state still in need of service. And there will be more truing up of the map. I mean, just in a reality world, you'll see places that were funded that projects didn't follow through. You'll see maybe some projects that we funded that they just weren't able to make it happen. And then I think we'll be cleaning up those areas, whether they were federally awarded or state awarded. That's where I see whether it's the state or the federal government working in those areas that don't have, or the project didn't reach everyone, and trying to make sure that those connections are made kind of in the spots between award and now, or previously awarded projects that didn't follow through.
Well, I think that's kind of all I had. I mean, I'm sure I can continue coming up with questions all day long. There's tons of broadband to talk about, so I'll just open the floor to both of you. Anything that we didn't cover about this challenge map or just broadband in general that you think listeners would want to know?
We're planning to post challenge resources on our website. And so I would encourage people who are interested in this process to go there. We just touched the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the challenge process in this podcast. We're going to have, I think it's up to like a 20-page user guide. We're planning to put some videos, lots of information on our website. So if people are interested in learning more and want to be an expert on this topic, there'll be plenty of resources on there to check out, and just stay tuned in the weeks ahead as we get this challenge process rolling, opening March 25th.
That's the main thing. Get out there, check out the map. Broadbandmap.mov.gov. I'll be saying it from now until mid-April a lot, but please go out there, check out the map. There are going to be areas that you're naturally familiar with. I went to my hometown. I go to the areas I know familiar with, right? If you're a provider, a local government, a challenger, or a citizen, please go check out the map. We want this to be as accurate as possible. If you can weigh in a meaningful way. If you're a local leader and know the areas that need work, if you need to, feel free to reach out to us anytime. We would be happy to try to help with the process. We can't be the challenger, but we would be happy to help interpret what you're seeing on the map and try to make sure that it is right as possible, because we want to get this right, because it does impact the funding decisions. So that's really it. Get out there, check out the map. Hopefully you like it. There was a lot of work that went into it, and we're going to try to make it as accurate as we can before we get into this actually funding round. And just know you're going to hear the words broadbandmap.mo.gov quite a bit. We're going to be on radio and every channel that'll let us. We will be talking about this effort, just because we want to be efficient with what we're doing. We don't want to fund places that already have service, but we don't want to leave somebody behind.
This has been a lot of great information. I certainly don't envy the task that lays before you guys and the team. You guys are going to be super busy. I hear the conversations and the phone calls and all that you guys are taking. So
you're lucky. You get to hear most of it at this point.
Yeah. But thank you guys so much for taking a small bit of your day to sit down and give all this great information. Hopefully anybody listening learns something new and gets out there and interacts with this map.
Yep, please do.
Okay, thanks guys. Thank you for listening to this episode of Inside Eco Devo. We have great episodes coming your way every 2 weeks, so be sure to subscribe. Also, we want to hear from you, our listeners. Tell us what economic development topics you want to hear more about. This helps us fulfill our motto of helping Missourians prosper by bringing content to our listeners that they want to hear. Leave a comment on an episode or send an email to ded.communications@ded.mo.gov, and stay tuned for more Inside Eco Devo.